Well, I have 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Todd Reck, and I'm the Water Utilities Director here for the City of Irving. And also I wanted to introduce Donna Starling. She's our Programs Manager. She's over the Water Conservation Program and spends a lot of time talking to customers on the phone, going out in the field, and that's just one of the hats that she wears for us, but she does a lot of different things. What we wanted to do tonight is update you on our water conservation program and our drought contingency plan. It's a document, and it's required to be updated every 5 years with the TCEQ, which is the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. That's our regulatory agency, and so we're at that point where it needs to be updated. So there's some key things that we wanted to run through with you tonight. We're going to go through a little bit of background, and then I'll hand it off to Donna, and then she'll go through actually what the current plan elements are, and then some of the things that we're proposing. And before we wrap it up, we have a survey that we'll hand out, and we want to get your feedback. Several questions in there. One of them will be the twice-a-week watering that we'll be proposing, and so we're collecting all those. This is the third night we've done this, with fourth public presentation, so this will be it, and then we'll come back to the full council here in a couple of weeks and present our findings and make a recommendation. So.
Can we ask questions along the way, or you want us to wait at the end?
You're welcome to ask questions along the way. If you'd rather, that's fine. So a little bit of background. If you're not familiar with our water supply, Irving is very fortunate in that we do have our own water supply. It's a result of many, many years. It goes back about 50 years of hard work. And our water supply is Lake Chapman. It's up here in the right-hand corner of the map. Here's Irving and the Metroplex. Over here, this gold color. You've got Lake Chapman. This is Sulphur Springs, City of Sulphur Springs, to give you an idea where it's located. It's a pretty good distance east. And we built infrastructure. We have a pipeline that's roughly about 75 miles that carries our water. We pump every day from Lake Chapman to Lake Louisville. We have the ability to store some water in Louisville, and then we also discharge water out of that lake, and then it goes down the Elm Fork and Trinity River, where the City of Dallas treats it for us, and then we bring it into Irving, where we send it out to our customers. So lakes are certainly a good thing and an important part of our water supply. And Irving is one of only, I'd say, 2 cities in the Metroplex, major cities, that has their own water supply, Dallas being the other one. The other cities in the Metroplex buy their water from Dallas and some of the other wholesale water districts. So we're unique in that regard. Lakes are great, but we need it to rain, and this is some of the history that we've had since we began pumping water out of the lake. And this is a graph that shows the rainfall, and this is from the watershed that feeds into the lake. It feeds the rivers that feed into the lake. And we began utilizing our lake in 2003, and you can see here's where the rainfall was expected, and we had a pretty good deficit. And there's 11 years here represented since we did start, and 8 of those 11 years we've had below average rainfall. So we've had some big challenges, and it seems like we've been in a continual drought the last 11 or 12 years. So that's really why we're here tonight to talk to you, is to talk about conservation and what we can do to make sure we maintain our water supply levels for public health and public safety and our basic needs. This shows the water supply level, and of course that corresponds to the amount of rainfall we're receiving. And if you look at the red line at the top, that means the lake is full. That's an elevation of 440 feet. That's where we would like to be. Under normal circumstances, our water level would hover right around that. This graph actually shows about 4 years of data. That was the last time the lake was completely full. If you look on the far left, those dates are back in 2010. So we went through about a 2-year period where the lake dropped, and then we had some pretty good relief from rain. It came up, and then we've been in another about a 2-year period of decline until just recently we've seen some relief. But it's been a challenge across the Metroplex, and a lot of y'all have read articles about other water districts and other areas that actually have a lot worse than we do, that are on once every other week watering right now, really concerned about losing their water supply. So water Water's a big issue in the Metroplex, and certainly the drought's had a big impact on us. The things we're here to talk to you about tonight are conservation and drought, and our plan that we have to address those things. Conservation is, those are the things, the proactive things that we can do every day to try to maintain the water supply that we have, to save the water that we have. Things like being smart about the time of the day that we irrigate, not watering every day, which used to be a pretty common practice. I think we've come a long ways with our customers and people realizing that you don't have to water every day. It's actually much better if you don't. Reuse is something, I'll try to stand away from that. Reuse is something that we've had in Irving for many years. We're one of the leaders in water reuse with our Las Colinas area. And that's taking the reclaimed wastewater from the Trinity River Authority's treatment plant. That's where our wastewater is treated. Instead of discharging that back in the river, we capture some of that, and it goes up to feed the canals and the waterways in Las Colinas. Also, the golf courses and a lot of the corporate areas up there use that water. So that's been a big part of the plan here in Irving for many years. The drought measures are a little bit different, and that's the reactive part. Of course, we want to save as much as we can in the conservation program, but when we do see the levels of our lake drop, we've got to be able to respond to that, and that's part of what we're going to talk to you about tonight as well, is the stages of our drought plan, and that's when we get into talking about stage 1, 2, and 3, and things you hear on the radio about once a week watering, twice a week watering, et cetera. But those are things that we do to react to lake levels and drought. Yes, ma'am. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. If you look at this graph, our lake is down only 8 feet, and you can see we have a pretty good distance that we could pump. We can pump about 25 feet down in the lake. It's what the bottom of the graph represents. But if you think about a lake, it's shaped more like a cone, and that most of the volume is going to be in the top part of the lake. So even though we're only 8 feet down, the current capacity of the lake is about 52%. So even though it doesn't sound like much, being only 8 feet down, and we could pump all the way down to 25 feet, it is a big deal. That's a good point. And this is a map that we look at. It's one of the tools that we continually look at when we're determining what stage we should be in along with the lake levels. This just shows where the current intensity of the drought across the state, and you can see the Wichita Falls area is in the darkest part, the maroon part, and that's where you're reading a lot of articles about them potentially running out of water. We are on the far right-hand side of that red area, so we're still in a pretty significant drought. And again, this is just part of the picture, even though you'll see some areas on here like the Austin area that's not as dark, and it looks like they're in much better shape. They're in better shape, but their reservoirs haven't recovered. They still have lakes down there 30 or 40 foot low. So this is just one of the tools that we use when we're looking at the drought and what we need to do to react to the drought. So why conserve? And we talked about this a little bit, had a conversation right before we started. A big part of it's our population is going to continue to grow. And we've seen good growth in Irving throughout the years. We're currently a little over 220,000. We're planning for a water supply 50 years down the road of 280,000. So there is additional water supply that we are working on. We have a long-range water supply plan right now that we are working on with some consultants, and we'll be looking at a number of different options for future water supply for Irving, but certainly expect the population to continue to grow and the demand. Another reason to conserve is we're not building as many lakes anymore, and that's what this graph up here represents. If you can see 1970, that's the peak of that line, and what that represents is the volume of water in lakes per person. We did a great job building lakes, I'd say up through about the 70s or 80s, and then we stopped for different reasons, but part of it's just because it's become so difficult to build a lake. It takes 20 or 30 years now to build a lake. And then we've used a lot of the best places to build lakes also, so you don't see near the focus on building lakes as you used to, although we are still working on several lakes in Texas. But we just don't have as much water stored in lakes per person as we used to, and we expect that to continue to decline. So that's where conservation is going to be real important for us, to make sure we are conserving our water supplies and that we're managing our water supplies like we should. And then we're also going to be working real hard to develop new supplies, whether that's lakes or how we reuse water, recycle water, and all available options that we have out there to us. So at this point, I just wanted to give you some background on our water supply and what it looks like and some of the things that we're doing. Donna Starling is going to take you through the rest of the presentation and talk about what our current plan looks like and some of the proposed changes. And again, if you have questions, please stop us and we'll be glad to answer questions. We'll have plenty of time afterwards to stick around and do that as well.
All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is over the many years, we have made adjustments to both our drought plan and our water conservation plan. And in more recent years, we've learned that we're going to be more successful in this region if we actually tackle some of that together with some of the other folks across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because ultimately we're all drawing from the same general supplies and we're all educating and advertising to the same groups of people. And folks don't necessarily realize when they cross from one city into another that they may have a different set of requirements. And so it's incumbent upon us to find ways to help people understand, because if we want them to comply and we want them to be willing participants and help conserve water, we've got to make it very plain and straightforward for them. And so we've gotten together with a number of agencies over the last year, and we've discovered that there are some things that we can agree on, and that if we pursue those things as we update our plans, we feel like we'll be more successful, and certainly the advertising that's done from one city to the next then will be helpful because it'll be advertising the same things we're trying to accomplish. And here are the things that we've looked at specifically with regard to regional consistency, and that is having in our conservation plan the year-round, twice-a-week watering. That year-round, twice-a-week watering is something that's already been adopted by a number of cities. I'm going to show you graphically how that looks here in a minute. So it's something that we felt like it would be a good water conservation method, and so we are putting it in our conservation plan that's being recommended to the council. And for our drought stages, consistency would mean having stages that have similar requirements. And so we decided that 3 stages looks like it could cover most needs, and that would be starting out with twice a week in the first drought stage, which would also have some additional requirements for folks. So it's not just the twice weekly watering. The reason why we focus a drought stage on irrigation is because 60% or better of domestic water use is used for irrigation. So if you want to really make some headway in terms of conserving water and getting people to cut back, you tackle the irrigation side because that's where they're using most of their water. So you can see if we move to stage 2, then it would be 1 time per week watering, and stage 3, no outdoor watering. There would be some opportunity still to water foundations and trees. Those are things that are obviously very important, and so we would have that written into the plan. So just to give you a picture of that, what you see in green are the cities that have already adopted year-round, twice-a-week watering. So most of Dallas County and most of Tarrant County already have, especially because Fort Worth and Dallas have adopted that, you already see them being covered by that. In addition, Allen and Keller, Louisville, up in Denton County, so that's where the green is, right up there by Lake Louisville. And then Rockwall, Southlake, and University Park. University Park is an enclave city in Dallas, so it kind of blends in there. But there are at least 7 cities that have adopted that, and we feel like that's a great trend, and it helps us with that consistency factor. Currently, in our conservation plan, we have a number of features. Our last update, by the way, was in December of 2011. So we don't update just when the state tells us we have to, but 2014 is a year when TCEQ says we need to see updates to your drought plan and to your water conservation plan. And so that's really what is driving the timing behind this right now. And so the big thing, obviously, is we want people to use water efficiently on a day-to-day basis. And so we have a number of things. One of the more recent things that we have instituted is the 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. prohibition, where we say, please don't irrigate. That's the least efficient time of day to irrigate. And so that was in one of our most recent updates, but it is in April to October, April 1st to October 31st time period in the water conservation plan. Now, that's different than if we have activated a drought stage, because if we're in a drought stage, then that 10 to 6 prohibition is always in place, because it's never a good idea to water at that time of day. And so during drought stages, we really stay away from it. The reason that was created that way is so that when we do get into our winter months, and instead of watering overnight, which is an okay thing to do in the summertime, that tends to be when our temperatures drop and become the coldest. And so we really don't want people turning on their sprinkler systems overnight and then having frozen roads all over the place. So that's why that is April to October. And then just general prohibition on water wasting. If we see different ways that water is being wasted, then we've got the ability to respond to that. So there's a number of different features. Rain and freeze sensors are required and have been required since 2009 on all irrigation systems in Irving. And so that's been something that has helped, and we're still working on that. We still find opportunities for enforcement for that particular feature. We also have a very active leak detection program. It just so happens that there are all 3 members of that program here tonight. So these guys back up here are out every day looking and listening in particular to the lines that are underground, and they have special devices that allow them to hear water that's escaping. And when they determine that there is a leak, if it's on our system, and we have 700 miles of water distribution line, if it's on our system, then they will schedule a repair through our supervisors and our operations side. And if it is on your system, then they'll leave you an advisory and let you know, it looks like you have a leak of some sort, and if they're able to determine what that is, they'll give you as much information as they can. So they're out all the time working on that, and that's a key part of our conservation measures. In addition, we have a couple different things. We have a home water audit and then irrigation checkups, and John Mahoney, who's our water conservation specialist, he's here tonight also. He's the one who stocks all of the information on water conservation and drought that's up in this kiosk over here. And so he makes sure that there's information on how to be responsible users of Irving water. And he goes out on an appointment basis, and he'll meet with folks at their home and try to help them see where they might find ways to conserve water, where water might be leaking, where the irrigation system might not be operating effectively. He's not a licensed irrigator, and so he's not going to be the one to come in and fix your system, but he can definitely point some things out based on all of his years of experience where there might be some issues. And that's just one feature of our public education program. We're in the schools, and we go to a lot of different public events where we're talking to people about water conservation and the drought and taking care of our water in Irving. And again, as Todd talked about earlier, of course, having active reuse program as well. So those are some of the things we're already doing. And this is a list of 5 things that we are specifically adding into our water conservation plan, and it'll be in the recommended plan that we take to the council here in a few weeks. First of all, the year-round twice-weekly watering. Yes, ma'am.
You're allowed to water by hand, right? A hose and sprinkler.
The way we are currently written in our system, and certainly because we are in stage 3, which is once a week watering, you can water by handheld hose with a positive shutoff nozzle only on your watering day. So you can water by hose, and you can do the handheld watering, but it's only on your watering day at this point.
I didn't think it used to be.
Well, and we've modified the plan over the years, and one of the things that we're going to ask for feedback from tonight from you guys on is, should we modify that? There is very specific questioning on the handheld watering in the questionnaire that we're going to give you here in just a little bit. So you can elaborate on that. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Any day of the week, you can go out and take a bucket of water or a watering can and water plants that you have out there, because that's something that's not attached to any sort of water system, and you're in charge of that water, and you can fill it up, take it out there, and put it on a tree, put it on a plant, that kind of thing. So that's the one that I tell folks, any day you can water using a watering can or a bucket. Now, the second thing that's listed here is a prohibition on free-flowing hoses, and that has to do with the fact that a lot of times if people are going to just leave a hose out flowing, say, on a tree or around their foundation, there's a great tendency to forget it. And we've run across so many times where that's happened, and water's just running, maybe for a few hours, maybe for a few days, possibly even for a week or more, running down the street. And that's a huge waster of water. And so for our hoses, when you're using hoses for hand watering or any purpose, like a car wash, it needs to have a positive shutoff nozzle on it. And that's one of the new features in Water Conservation Plan. They do, and there are a number of ways to try and tackle that, but having run into this particular problem, we're taking all the steps we can. So, you are. A lot of people don't do that, so that's a responsibility issue, and having this helps us to achieve that. Also, enforcement of private property leaks. So if there is a leak at your home, we're going to be taking stronger action in terms of compelling you to fix those leaks. And in many cases, those leaks are actually costing you money. So it's just a matter of making sure that we don't have water that's leaving the system, escaping the system, and escaping your system, and not actually accomplishing anything. And then we are adding a feature for what we refer to as an ICI program, and that's industrial, commercial, and institutional, and that would be partnering with the group of businesses that use over 30% of our water here in Irving. And so that is an area where we need to work with them hand in hand to find opportunities so that they can conserve water and make sure that their irrigation systems are operating appropriately, those sorts of things. So that's what you would find in this type of program. And then this would be a program that we would either develop in-house with staff or subcontract for. We're not exactly sure what the approach would be at this point, but it is definitely where other organizations that have those programs have seen some real good results. So we want to look at what we're going to be able to do here in Irving with that. The weather station program actually is already in place, so we're now writing it into our plan, but we installed 2 weather stations last year in October, and we began advertising them fairly actively this year. So we encourage you, when you go home, go sign up if you're not already registered for watermyyard.org. What this actually does is it allows you to get a weekly email and tell you how much supplemental watering you need in addition to any precipitation that we've had. And so it's a very helpful tool if you want to actively manage your irrigation and save money. And just to give you a picture of that, when you go to watermyyard.org, you'll see a map, such as this one on the left. The purple is the north end of the city. The little yellow dot at the top is the weather station that is at Sam Houston Trail Park. And in the green portion, or the southern end of the city, our weather station is at the Criminal Justice Center. The data from those weather stations is automatically dialed into the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service every day and compiled. You can actually see that data on a daily basis. You can set it up to feed it in weekly or every 2 weeks or however you want to see it, and going out to the Texas ET Network. And there's a link to the Texas ET Network at watermyyard.org if you're really interested in the details of what's going on from an evapotranspiration point of view. And evapotranspiration is a measure of the amount of water plants need to be healthy. So that's what ET and the ET Network stands for. So you can see if you sign up here, depending on what part of the city you live in, you can get information on how much supplemental watering you need. And interestingly enough, when we had our big rain last week, I went onto the website and looked, and in the north end of the city, we had just a hair under 2 inches of rain. In the south end of the city, we had just a little bit under 1 inch of rain. So there really was a difference depending on where you lived in Irving as to how much water you got. Now, I will say that based on that level of rain, there was no need and is no need to water again until really after tomorrow. So everybody's all set up probably to water again this weekend. But
You check those figures, is that veiled or what?
the data from the ET network, which is the actual amount of precipitation, you actually have to go onto the ET network and look up either the north weather station or the south weather station. The email that you receive tells you, based on the information that you feed in about how you water your lawn, it tells you how long you need to water in addition to what's been received. Now, the data that you see up here is actually from Fort Worth. They shared this with us, that over in 2013, in 33 of the weeks, 33 of the 52 weeks, they were able to tell their water users, don't water at all. So, I mean, that's a great achievement to know that you're monitoring it closely enough to be able to say, you don't have to water for 33 weeks. In 13 of their weeks, they said, water your lawn once a week. And then for 6 of their weeks, they said, go ahead and water twice a week. So, and they administer their system a little differently than we anticipate. But this is good data. Frisco does much the same thing. So good information. Yes, ma'am.
Does that assume when you do water your once a week, there's a certain amount of time?
And see, what our system does is it tells you how often you need to water and then how long you need to water. So it tells you both, yes.
Based on what? Past water usage? Or?
Based on the evapotranspiration data and the specifications that you have entered regarding your own water system. So if you're using okay, the information that either comes off of the database that's been collected from our weather stations is factored in with whatever system you're using to water. So if you're using sprinklers in your yard and you are able to come up with a measure of how much water you're putting on your yard, you enter that in, and then it'll tell you how long you need to run your sprinklers. Okay? In addition to any rain that might have fallen. And if no rain fell, it'll give you a number regardless.
Yeah, I've always heard it's better to deep water plants.
That is correct.
To lightly water, more often.
The best way to water is to use a cycle soak method and to water for about 5 to 7 minutes at the most. Let it rest. Let your lawn rest for an hour. No matter what you're using, it's better to use cycle soak. Then let your lawn rest for about an hour and run it again for about 5 minutes. And that's because once you've hit 5 to 7 minutes, all the water that you're throwing out there is running off. And if you've got really big slopes, it's probably running off at a higher rate than if you've got just a flat yard. And so what you want to do is you want to allow that water to soak in and then come back and put more water on it when that's already soaked in. And that's where you get better root growth and you have a more drought-resistant lawn. These people that are watering their lawn every day, every other day, which is far too frequent, those roots are very stunted. But those people that are watering once or twice a week but getting a good deep watering in, then depending on what your drought restriction allows, those folks have roots that are going much deeper. And they're gonna, and then when we have the hot temperatures hit in August, then that's gonna be the more resilient yard. And that's gonna be the one that doesn't look as stressed as quickly. So, all right. So definitely a win-win. When we're talking about conservation, just twice a week, year-round twice a week watering can help us to save 5 to 8% in terms of reducing the water that we're using. And then it'll also help us because, we hate to implement drought measures and have to tell people you can only water twice a week, you can only water once a week, you can't water at all. Fortunately, we've never had to go there, and that's a good thing. But it will delay, if we're responsible and use water conservation to help us, then we can delay when we're going to have to implement the actual drought measures. And so that's helpful to us. In addition to which, you can maintain a healthy lawn, and it'll reduce your costs. If you're being conservative, you're not going to have to pay as much for water. And of course, the most important thing that we're looking at in water utilities all the time is that our supply of water is available and is going to sustain us in all of our health and safety needs. What we currently have in terms of our drought stages are 5 stages. The first is voluntary, and then stage 2 is twice a week, 3 is once a week, 4 would be no watering at all, and then 5 is actually in response to a water emergency. So it's not in response to a drought or drought conditions. It would be short-term conditions where we have maybe we lose a tank, or we have a major line break, and we need to tell people, stop using water. Stop using water, and hopefully within 48 to 72 hours, we'll be back to a point where everything is back up and running. That would be an unusual circumstance, and so having it in the drought plan is really not a good place to put that. We're going to do that if we need to do that, when we need to do that, but it's not going to be in response to drought. So we're going to remove that emergency shortage piece from the drought plan. It doesn't really belong there. And we're also going to remove stage 1, which is the voluntary, which doesn't help a whole lot. We would hope that people would use water responsibly all the time, but the implementation of the year-round twice-a-week watering would help us to actually get that sort of responsiveness from our water customers. So that's the 5 that we have. What we're looking at in the proposed plan is a 3-stage approach, and you'd see an additional trigger, because we have a number of triggering conditions that would cause us to go into a drought, so we've looked at adding to that. We have an additional trigger that's added into each stage, and a reduction to 3. In the first stage, we have to set goals, what we want to achieve if we're implementing this. And so the goal for the first stage would be to reduce our water demand by 3%, and that would be twice weekly watering, with some other sorts of things that are being looked at and enforced. In stage 2, we would want to reduce by 8%, and that's going to be once a week watering. And in stage 3, if we're not doing any irrigating at all, and we're enforcing that effectively, we should be able to reduce our water demand by over 20%. So those are the goals that we established, and those goals are required by TCEQ. They ask us to set goals. So for our proposed drought measures, we have added the ability for putting in surcharges in stage 2 and stage 3, where you're going to once a week or no watering at all. Those folks that are still using excessive amounts of water would be paying more for that water. A surcharge of 25% or 50% if we're not supposed to be using any water at all. Now that would be for an elevated use of water at a time when we need people to reduce their use of water, and it would be at the discretion of the city council as to whether or not they would want to activate the surcharge. In addition, we have written into the plan the opportunity to administratively enforce our drought restrictions. And so that would mean that if somebody were watering when they shouldn't be, that we would meet with them, we'd let them know that we have seen them irrigating or whatever they're doing, which is against the restrictions, and we would post a $25 fine on their bill. They can have that waived by attending a class on responsible water use and irrigation within 90 days. So sort of like a red light camera. It's something that's automatically detected, placed on there, but it can be waived, much like, say, defensive driving for a driving infraction. If there were additional offenses, the fine would go up, $50 for a second and $100 for a third. And once we're to the point where we've got a $100 fine, we also would then be more actively providing citations and taking that into the court system, which is actually where we take it now. If you've had an infraction, after we issue an NOV, we can immediately then give you a citation, which is probably going to be a minimum of $300 to $400. So by taking this back into sort of the administrative realm, we're able to reduce the penalty and really elevate the education associated with it. So it's a much more positive approach to enforcement, and we think that people will be able to understand better what we're trying to accomplish with that.
This is just another thing the city's not going to enforce.
it depends.
We're gonna see that tomorrow, and I'll bet you he didn't come out the next day either.
When we are given addresses, we put them in a queue, and we respond, and we go to every single address. Most of them John responds to, so he's nodding his head over there. Right now, we're getting a lot of those. I actually posted 37 door hangers myself this afternoon. So we are going out there. And that was all from complaints. I received, in one subdivision, I received complaints about, well, actually it was 38. I received complaints about 37 residences. I posted a door hanger at every place and then found another one on my way back to the office. So we do respond, and there's only a couple of us, so we don't always respond in the kind of response time you'd expect from police or fire, but we definitely get out there, and our first goal, always, is to inform someone what we need them to do to help us to use the water wisely. And that is, this is your day you can water. Every single one of those notices, I told those folks, based on their address, what day they could water, and asked them not to water between 10 and 6. I hand wrote that on every single notice, along with what was observed going on at their residence. And then when we get phone calls, and we do, a lot of those folks, some folks believe they're complying, and they don't know that their sprinkler is turning on after they've gone to work in the middle of the day. And so we'll go out, we'll talk with them, we'll show them how to turn things on and off. We'll look up the description of how to operate their system and try to help them learn to operate it. We do a great deal, mostly toward education, because that's really what we want. We want people to use water wisely. We don't want to have to go to court. So, oh, yes, sir.
I have two questions. One is, once they go beyond the third phase, are you allowed to give them, like, the Class C misdemeanor? Are you allowed to give them a misdemeanor that it kind of hits them and says, hey, I now have an offense against? Or
It is
you can
written.
only do fines?
It is written into the plan that based on the number of offenses, we have the ability to turn their water off. Now, we would not really want to get there. We would want to find a way to help them figure out how to comply. That's just not even in my realm of thinking, because I don't want anybody to be in that situation. But here's the deal. When we're issuing citations, every day and every offense is separate. So that means if you do something today and you do it tomorrow, you can get a citation for the same thing. Both, that's right. And if you do, let's say you're watering between 10 and 6 and you're watering on a Thursday, which is a no watering day, that's 2 different offenses. If you do the same thing on Friday, it's 2 different offenses. So it would be 4 by the time you got to that point.
My second question is, do you have a plan to help us, or the residents, to understand how to reuse, like, and how long to use that water? If we reuse water, put it in like a bucket or something, and then reuse it, does it last for so long? Or how can we go to a reuse?
If you're using water for non-potable purposes, which is what we would want you to reuse water for, non-potable, not drinking, not your health and safety. We want to treat it before you drink it. But if you're, say, collecting in a rain barrel that you've got set up at your house, then you can water any plants. That water is going to be good. You're going to have screens put on it so that you don't have mosquito larvae in it and that kind of thing. But you're going to be able to use that as you need to. I heard several people say the other night that they filled up their rain barrels last Thursday. It was a really good rain day. So they were able to recoup all that water, and then now they can use it for a variety of different purposes at their house.
Okay.
So,
And that lasts over
and there are classes that the city offers.
Okay.
We have classes periodically to help you set up your own rainwater harvesting system and talk about things you need to do with mosquitoes and how long the water is good to use and so forth. So that would answer a lot of your questions, I think.
Okay, great, thank you.
And if you've got some specific questions at your home and you want somebody to come out and talk to you about your irrigation system or something like that, you can make an appointment, and we can have a staff member that comes out and visits
We
you.
all talked to Channel 11 lady.
I talked to Channel
They
11
came on
last
with
week.
10 and said that as of now, Irving don't have any water restrictions. You can water all you want to, and I've got it on tape
Oh, I'd like to see that.
just a while ago. And I got my water bill that says we're in a Class 3 water restriction.
We are currently in
And I've been
stage
here,
3.
I'm new, I just came here in 1955.
We are currently in
My
stage
daughter
3.
just chewed me out in an unbelievable manner, and I didn't drink it.
about it all. We'll just help you figure out what it's going to take to help your yard survive in
What
the
is
conditions.
Channel 11 doing, putting that on there?
I don't know. That's
We'll follow up with them.
It was Karen Barter and the
I
fella
heard
right
that,
beside her,
2 days ago, when that other
and
meeting
it
was
came
going
on at 6:10.
it wasn't quite
It
free.
says, as of right now, Irving don't
Okay.
have any water restrictions.
Irving does have water restrictions. We are in stage 3 with once a week water.
You haven't had all year.
Yes, since the beginning of December
And I'm not a
2013.
rich man.
So, yes, we are definitely, yes, ma'am.
I want to ask you a question about notifications. I take a walk every morning, and a lot of people in my neighborhood still think that, like, they can water on Wednesday. And I've been calling them.
Right.
Now, what I saw up there said that someone from your department must see it. I never, almost
If
always
we're
don't
gonna-
see it, but I see the evidence.
Right.
Standing water, wet sidewalks, the grass is glistening. Is that all right, or should I still be
We can issue a notice of violation if we see that strong evidence of that. But in order to give them a citation, which is a ticket that they're going to take to court and have a large fine, we want to see it happening, and we want to be able to get a photograph.
Got groceries
Now,
over here.
I'm assuming
I
that
need
you all
something
are
to take
following
on
through.
Sweet Dollar.
We are. As a matter of fact, I received 2 emails this morning, and that's why I went out to those 37 locations to post those. If you want, my business card is over here. If you want a copy of that, and if you want to send me, I get emails every morning, and one of the first things I do is, right, emails are much more efficient and effective, and then as I get to them, I write them on my list, and if I know I'm not going to be able to respond, most of the time I send them to John. I've got another person that also responds. So,
I know it's working because some of them you don't see them yet, and others.
right.
I
Yes,
run
sir.
it like 5:15, 5:30 in the morning, and every morning there's one sprinkler that goes off. Every morning at 5, it's usually about 5:30 by the time I pass it. But you guys won't, obviously. So
We-
when I send you an email, it's every morning.
You can send me an email, and we'll go out and talk to them about it and leave them a door hanger. And if we find out that they're still doing it, then we'll get a little more serious with them. So, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. You have a question?
I'd like to have about 3 minutes to give my plan on conservation.
Well, actually, we have a specific approach that we're
Well,
taking
I'm
right
taking your
now,
time.
and we
When
need
you're
to.
done, whatever, I'd like to share with
If you want to hang around and talk to folks when we're done here,
No,
that'll
no,
work.
I'm not gonna do
So,
that.
okay.
I have to talk to each one individually.
We have a survey that we want to pass out. Before we do, up here you see cityofirving.org, which is our website. That is where you can find a lot of information on water conservation. And so there are some specific articles, things you can do in the summer, things you can do in the winter. If you want to request a variance, let's say you're putting in a new lawn and you need that, then you can get the information that you need to provide it to me in an email is the most efficient way to do it, and then I send you back an email variance, and you can post that, and you don't have to run around all over the city and fill out forms and that sort of thing. We try to make it as simple and straightforward as we possibly can. That would be on our website on the Water Utilities page. Then we have information on weather stations. There's some articles that are also on our website. That's where you see that ASP suffix. And then go to watermyyard.org. And there's a lot of information on there that can be very useful, and you can sign up, and that's probably the most important thing of all. So our next steps are, this is the last public meeting. We want to gather information from you. We are distilling that information and looking at whether or not there's any more features we want to consider adding. There are a couple of things that we've talked to people about in the last few weeks that we want to look at adding to our plan potentially. And based on what the feedback is that we get, that's the direction that we'll head. There's a city council meeting on August 7th. It's our plan to have this on the agenda for that council meeting. And then, of course, we have to submit this as the state requires. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality wants this submitted to them in September. And so that's the timeline that we're on, and those are the next steps. Any other questions that you have before we pass out the survey? Yes, sir. These slides should already be posted on the website. When you go onto the cityofirving.org, then there is a public input tab sort of down in the middle of the page by the departments. If you go under public input, the survey that we're going to distribute tonight is already listed there. It can be filled out online. In addition, right beside it is this presentation. So you can go back. If you have people that you know of that would be interested in this, but they weren't able to make it to a meeting, encourage them to go out to that site and to fill that out. That would be helpful to us. Yes, ma'am.
I have one question, and it may be in your survey, but just in case it's not. Has any consideration been given to the change in which day, odd and even, water? And the point I want to bring up, for years, I always have to water on Sundays because I'm odd number. That's very difficult if you want to go to church, you want
Yes.
to get up and whatever. To me, it would look like, okay, for the first 3 months, it's odd, it's on Sundays, the other Saturdays, and then 3 months later, reverse it, and so on. I mean, you would have to
I
reset
appreciate
your
that.
schedule. I also don't have a sprinkler system, so not only do I have to try and rush it, it takes a lot of time
Right.
getting in and out, moving and changing.
Yes, ma'am. That's an opportunity for a variance. If you want to change days, and I'm not going to tell, 200,000 people to go tell me you want to change days. Actually, the reason it is as it is now is for ease of enforcement. It's very hard to stop at each house and say, okay, what are they going to be doing? And then, so that's the reason. But if you need a variance, if there's a reason, a compelling reason, then send that to me. We can switch your day of the week from, right now it'd either be Saturday or Sunday. So it would go to Saturday. We can do that.
Not necessarily all year, just,
We can do that. There is no plan to change that on a large scale because we have done so much to try and educate people. It would be a huge re-education effort, and so at this point, we're planning on continuing as it is. But if you need a variance, then let me know.
We have surveys.
And we do. We have surveys right over here.
Please, we're going to hand out the surveys here real quick. Please take a few minutes and fill those out. We really do want to get your feedback on the plan and some of your thoughts, or some space to write in comments or different things, different subjects that are discussed. And certainly the twice a week is one that we want to get feedback on. And the hoses, the free-flowing hoses, and how we use that, what days a week we allow that. We get some feedback on that as well. So please take a minute and fill that out, and Ms. Wilson would like to make some comments as well.
I'm an elder, and I live in my own home that I've owned for over 30 years. And, my backyard kept getting bigger and bigger. And then every lawnmower went out of business, and I thought, now what do I do when I need an honest repairman? Well, I found out that these guys are now charging $25 to $50 deposit, non-refundable, just to look at your lawnmower. So anyway, what I decided to do is to plant my whole yard in perennials. For those of you who don't know, these are flowers that come back year after year. And I would be glad to share some of my bulbs and rhizomes and et cetera with you, and it wouldn't cost you a dime. In a couple of years, my entire yard, including the alley and the strip between the sidewalk and the street, are filled with flowers. I cut my grass with a 13-inch home-like trimmer, because all I need to do is cut between the flowers, and that's enough for my dog to run. I have to water very rarely because the flowers protect each other's roots from the sun. And I do water with a hose, and I have cannas, which they love water, but I don't have to water more than once a week. In summer, you'll have flowers from daffodils on down. I have all kinds of different things you've probably never seen. So anyway, my name's Nancy Wilson. I'm in the phone book. I live on Bryn Mawr Drive. If you'd like to drive by and see my front yard. I have pink amaryllis, which I understand are very rare. And I'd be glad to share some flowers with you. Not only has it helped me conserve on water usage, but I've been able to stay in my own home. And this is very important